Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward, the podcast that reveals how to plan, achieve, and enjoy the journey of creating epic results in your life, business, health, and relationships. Here's your host, best-selling author and motivational speaker, Xander Sprague.
Hello, epic people, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Xander Sprague, and today I am honored to be joined by Dr. Anthony Emmett, who was a surgeon and is now an artist. Dr. Emmett, thank you so much for joining me. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Good morning. I have been a surgeon and I have studied consciousness in people that I've dealt with. And this morning we're going to be talking about consciousness. Consciousness is one of the great things that all of us are using right now. We're using our everyday level of consciousness, but there are other levels, and these other levels determine the way our life progresses and the way we have come to this planet, been born, and consciousness came into our brain, our body, while we were being formed in our mother's womb, uterus, and now I'm speaking to you using my everyday consciousness, and you're listening at that level. But if you become bored and go to sleep, you'll be in another level of your consciousness at a slightly higher frequency. These different levels of consciousness work at different frequencies, and we as a society haven't really understood the way we use levels of consciousness in before we're born, in this life, after we die. We have different levels of consciousness we go to at different frequencies. And this explains a lot of the apparent mystery of how it is that we come to this planet, we live a life, and we die. We move to a different level of consciousness, a different dimension of being. And it's all at different frequencies, which is what we haven't understood. When you go to sleep, you actually move to a different frequency of consciousness that extends further than this one we're using now when we are so-called awake. Sometimes we're actually more awake when we're in the other levels.
That is really interesting. And I guess my first question I have for you is, as a surgeon, obviously when you go have surgery, most times you are put to, your general anesthesia, you're asleep in some way, you're sedated. Did you do any studies about what level of consciousness people have or don't have while they're in surgery?
Oh, yes, they're still conscious, but at a different level, a different frequency. And part of putting them to sleep is to settle down any sensations of pain or alarm.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of surgery under local anesthetic, and you could converse with people and distract their attention from what you were doing.
Sure.
At the same time, you would remove pain by the use of injected local anesthetic.
Absolutely. And you also might use sometimes you're using local, but you'd give them a amnesiac like Versed or something. So even though they
That's
were
right.
awake, they wouldn't.
Something to calm them.
Right.
But at the same time, you can calm people by conversation. And when I was operating on children, I had a picture on the ceiling of a castle with windows and apple trees around with apples and birds. And I'd have the children counting the number of windows in the castle. And while they were busy doing that, I'd slip the local anesthetic in, and then I'd do the operation, and they'd still be talking to me when we'd finished. And their attention was totally on the subject we were discussing. It's the same with adults. You find their topic of conversation, their interest, and get them to start talking to you about it. and you've finished the procedure before they've finished their story. It's you can make all of this quite pleasant depending on how you approach people, and yes.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that I mean, and that's interesting. So I know that you retired. Do you miss doing surgery? Or are you sort of like I spent 35 years doing it and I'm done?
No, I loved it, and I missed it. So I became a sculptor. As an artist, I became a sculptor when I retired, which satisfied my desire to continue creating. But I became interested in the self-image of people. We all have a self-image. When we are being formed in our mother's uterus, consciousness comes in to the body and the brain. And consciousness is a remarkable energy form, and we never lose it. It simply changes to different levels, different frequencies. When you are initially born, you start to form a self image, and this self image is very important. It's guided in the first 2 years of your life, you learn love. You learn love from your mother. And this is very important. In the formation of a person, there are different schedules that have to be met. And in the first 2 years, you have to learn love, what it is, how you apply it, how it will be in your life. And it becomes part of your self image, which is stored in your subconscious. The subconscious works it's part of your overall consciousness, but it's part of the unconscious. It's not in your everyday level that we're using right now. But all kinds of things we store in the subconscious, and they're then part of our unconscious mind, which works much more quickly than the conscious mind. For example, when you get up from your seat, you're walking, but the movements of walking you learned a long time ago and you filed them in your subconscious. The unconscious mind produces what you need in your conscious mind, and it does it very quickly and very accurately, such that we're often not aware that we're doing that. It's the same with
Absolutely.
the self image, it influences what you want to be, what you want to do, and who you think you are.
Cool.
So go ahead.
Oh, and well, what I was going to ask about that is, do you think that there's ways that people can tap more into that subconscious part of their brain on the conscious side? You know what I mean? I mean, like
Oh
sort of
yes,
like
oh yes, you
utilizing more of our brain power, because they say that we only use 10% of our brain, and there's
15.
15. Okay, but still,
um,
not a lot of it.
it's like an iceberg. The little bit up above the water is the 15% that we use in our everyday conscious level.
Mm-hmm.
The 85% is your sleep level, your subconscious, and your higher conscious,
Mm-hmm.
all of which connect you to infinity when you want
Mm-hmm.
to, but they work at different frequencies. And understanding that at a different frequency, you get into a different level of knowing, being, and connectedness. And it's always been like this, but people aren't really taught the way it works. And I've thought it's quite important in this stage of world transition that people have more idea of what they're connected to in their conscious and unconscious being. So when I operated on people, I would be reconstructing them, putting things back together again, or repairing things that hadn't been right when they were born. And in all of this, the important thing is the way you respond in your conscious level, because you are what you think you are. In your mind, if you think you're happy and well, then you influence all the living cells of your body, each of which is conscious, and you give the cells, particularly the immune system, which governs your health. If you are happy and laughing, you give laughter and love to all of the individual cells in your body. And when you say you're well, then you're well on the way to being well, because each cell in your body is conscious and you influence them to what you're thinking.
I couldn't agree more. About a year and a half ago, I shattered my shoulder in a mountain bike accident. And also broke my humerus, had to have surgery. And I honestly, from when I told people and like, oh my gosh, I'm like, but I'm going to be fine. I'm going to get back to most of where I am. I was aware I wouldn't have full range of motion in my shoulder just because, well, when you break the head of your humerus into 9 pieces, there's only so much they can do. I mean, they can repair it, but you're still going to have some residual stuff. But I firmly believe that my recovery is because I believe wholeheartedly that I was fine and that I would recover. And I've said often that I think sometimes our state of being, how we feel, and especially when it comes to aging, if we believe we're young, we don't feel old.
Yes, I agree completely. And the key to it is understanding that each of the individual cells in your body is separately alive and is separately conscious and has a memory.
Mm-hmm.
And you can project to that memory and to that cellular population. Firstly, by not thinking you're old and finished. Secondly, by believing you're well. And thirdly, by believing in your happiness. See, happiness is a choice. It's a choice you can make every day. You can decide to be happy, and that will influence the whole of your body population of conscious cells. We don't think of it that way, but it's a good way to approach each day, and each day consider that it will be a good day, and remember that consciousness, which we are using now, it broadcasts. Everything in the world has its own level of consciousness. We don't have any way of measuring that. Science can neither prove nor disprove a lot of what I'm going to say about consciousness. But you, in your unconscious mind, your deeper conscious mind, that hidden 85%,
Mm-hmm.
you connect with deeper levels of consciousness at higher frequency that run the whole show, that keep the world turning and alive. And everything is connected with one level of consciousness or another. We don't realize that very often, but it pays to know that what you're thinking radiates and can be detected. And in your higher consciousness, that's what you'll change to when your body dies. You will still be you, but at a different frequency and a different level of consciousness. And your energy is not lost, it simply changes form. That's the first law of thermodynamics. Physics agrees with all of it.
Well, physics is one of those immutable forces that do rule us. So yes, we can't argue with physics. And when we try to, we normally lose.
Yes, and the key thing is to live happily. You can be happy whatever's happening. It's an attitude of mind. As you choose to be happy, you will inevitably improve everything you're doing, everything you come in contact with, because you radiate happiness, and that affects other people. It affects all the cells of your body, and it makes the world a better place if everybody is happy. And the other thing is, you can forgive the others for what they've just done. You don't have to be angry, because as you get angry, bitter, and unhappy, that depletes your own being. It depletes your cellular health, and there's no need for it. If you could teach everybody to forgive, the world would be such a better place, because
I totally agree.
we don't have to get angry. We can see the other point of view, forgive them, and be happy. It benefits us as well as the rest of the world.
Absolutely. I guess as a mental health professional, I hear that and I look at it and say, how often you were talking about our view of self. and our consciousness, that pesky ego sometimes gets in the way of the forgiveness at times, because we don't want to admit that we were wrong, or that we want to consider someone else's opinion, however, or what's going on with them. So, but I do agree, the world would be a much better place if we all practiced a lot more forgiveness and considered what else may be going on for the other person.
So I've written this book called Your Unique Consciousness because when you consciousness comes into your body as you are being formed in your mother's womb, uterus, it's a particular one-off code type consciousness that's unique to you. And that's what you will record all the events of this life in. And when your body dies, you simply change frequency to another level of what is the unconscious mind during this life. You move to a different frequency of that consciousness, which moves to a different dimension. See, this world is made of atoms. Now, in each atom, there is, if you look inside the atom, it's a force field with particles at a particular vibrational frequency. Now, this dimension of life that we're in now, there are other dimensions of life around, but they're at different frequencies. It's like, and there's a relationship between the frequency of your consciousness and the frequency of the matter of the world that is around. And in your consciousness, you can influence events by wanting it to be that way. So if you want something very strongly and you hold that in your mind at that particular vibrational frequency, you will influence the course of events that are occurring around. And this is well recorded through history. Different clever people, prophets, philosophers have known for a very long time, and we know it now. And
Definitely.
if you sincerely believe that a thing is or should be, and you hold that belief, you will influence the course of events in this world and in the other dimensions around.
That is very interesting. I have a question for you, Dr. Emmett. When did you become so interested in consciousness and the unconscious and sort of the this whole area of study?
Well, as a child, my father was the only. I grew up in the tropics of northern Australia, and my father was the only doctor and surgeon in the area during the Great Depression and in World War II. And in the 30s and 40s, we used to repair things when they broke. We didn't throw them away and get a new one. And my father was so busy looking after the population that it fell to me to repair the things that went wrong in the house. So even when I was 7, I was being given things to fix. And I learned then that if I didn't know how to do it, if I simply sat with the object and wait, the knowledge of what to do would come into my mind and I would do it.
Oh,
And it's
cool.
been like that all my life. I've had a voice within. And I thought when I became a medical student, I decided quite early on to do medicine and surgery as a career. My father's surgery was attached to the house, and because I was a fair-skinned kid in the tropics, I had to keep out of the sun, and I knew this. This was before sun filters, and so I would read my father's books, and the pictures at a young age were easier than the words. But anyway, I learned that whenever I needed to know something, it would come to me when I wanted. And I assumed everybody had, but I think everybody has, but a lot of people don't listen to it. So I became early interested in my voice within, and I've had it all my life. And I, at one stage, believed everybody had it, but it's obvious many people don't, or they don't listen to it.
Right.
So when I was in medicine, I thought it would explain a lot of the things I wanted to know, but it didn't. And so after I retired at the age of 61, spent 5 years retraining as an artist. And during that time, I spent 2 years with a talented clairvoyant going into my unconscious mind to learn more. And there I met a very talented, gifted person called Sathya Sai Baba, who was alive in India, but I was working with a clairvoyant in Mossvale, Australia, and he was there in the other dimensional form. And so I was shown events in my past life, and this proved to me the reality of the spiritual level of life that could know what I'd been a couple of thousand years ago. And so I've always had an interest in what's going on in the unconscious mind and in the conscious mind of people I was dealing. And I also became aware that the result that I produced was related to what was going on in the subconscious.
That's,
And you see, when you do surgery, you begin a complicated physiological process. The response to injury in the body, the response to injury is quite a complex process, and you start this, but it's influenced by what's going on in your subconscious mind as well. The whole thing ties together. When we study anatomy, we're only studying the energy. It's like just looking at the mechanism in a TV set. That's not
right.
what brings it to life. It's the energy flowing through it that makes it work. And it's the same with us, with our mind, with our body, every bit of it, all work at different levels, frequencies.
Definitely. Now, here's something that I'm gonna sort of take a bit of a detour here for a moment, Dr. Emmett. One of the things that I talk about in my book, and I think is a very powerful force in all of our lives, are two words, which is not yet. Have you finished your sculpture? Not yet. It doesn't mean that you're not going to, it just means today it's not done, right? And I'm going to guess that as you're creating a sculpture, it may take you some time to complete it. The same way that when you were a surgeon, you would start a complex surgery. 5 minutes in, are you done? Not yet. I still have work to do. So my question that I like to ask all my guests are, what are some of your not yets? What are things that you think of and say, I'd like to do that, I'd like to go here, whatever it is. What is one or two of your not yet?
Well, the first thing is that time is part of the construction of matter. So everything is related. All time is now, past, present, and future, in ways that we don't understand. Remember, we're thinking with our human consciousness, which doesn't understand the whole thing.
Sure.
And we are only looking at part of the picture. So everything is in the process of, and when I do, I often will do an initial sculpture in clay, and that, as you've just said, is a process. There are many materials that you can use plasticine, which is a form of wax, but it's only one stage in the sculpture, because the next stage is you take a mold of that. You can take a silicon mold of, and then if you want a bronze, you can cast it into wax at that stage and use the lost wax process in a foundry to create a bronze. But you can also mix a polyester resin with bronze powder. You can mix 5 times the weight of the powder with the polyester resin, and you can put that into your silicon mold and make a sculpture that way. So no, nothing is ever fully finished. Everything is in the process of development, and that applies to the whole of your life. And the other thing is, you can change the frequency of your thoughts. You can be daydreaming, or you can go to sleep and move into a different frequency of connectivity. And in your deeper conscious, you can connect with all levels of the universe. Absolute consciousness is in the universe and has always been called different names. God, whichever religion is describing, a God is absolute consciousness. Everything is conscious. Everything created retains a level of consciousness that we don't understand, but it nevertheless is a conscious level that is connected to the creator, just as you have within, in your deeper consciousness, a connectivity to the creator of all things. And that gives you great power. And by the right approach, you can ask for things, you can wish for things, and if you hold a thing firmly in your mind and believe it, it can come to pass. It will come to pass if you ask and hold properly. And this has been known through the ages. The ancient Hippocrates and the early Greek physicians understood the power of suggestion in creating good health, and they used this extensively. So, and you can do this yourself, you can get professional help to do it. People have been taken back by hypnosis into previous lives, but you can do it in deep meditation, which I've done. I spent 2 years doing a session a week, going into past lives to understand the mechanism. And in the process of studying what I'd been in different existences through the thousands of years, I learned many things about the process itself and the entities involved with it.
That is fascinating. Well, I think our time is almost up here, Dr. Emmett. I want to thank you so very much for joining us and sharing all this really fascinating information about consciousness and the really the totality of it and how it affects our whole entire life. And it's just been fascinating, and I know I'm taking some of that away, and that sort of saying to the universe of what we want so that we can manifest it. I think that's a very powerful message.
Yes, and belief comes into it. You must believe in what you're holding in your mind, and that gives it a great power. And that power is manifested through your connectivity to higher consciousness, which you do by getting into that frequency. And you do this to a degree in sleep. The mechanisms of what happened in sleep I describe in the book, and the whole thing is quite fascinating. In the detail is I've attempted to put all the detail in, and
That's great.
I have enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you. And where can people get your book, Dr. Emmett?
If you go to Amazon Central Author page, you'll find me as Dr. Anthony J. Emmett. I have written a number of books. I've written a number of books about art, sculpture, consciousness, and this latest one is Your Unique Consciousness, which I've attempted to put in the sort of thing that people can use and understand. I'm attempting to produce more understanding so that we will be a more tolerant world. And in this overcrowded, overheated world, it's very important that we understand who and what we are and how we can help the planet. One of the things I see, we are all breathing oxygen. Oxygen is produced by photosynthesis from green leaves, and there needs to be a certain relationship between the bulk of humans, we're now 8 billion, and the bulk of forests and greenery to produce oxygen. And throughout history, we've been cutting forests down, but we now have the wealth to start planting them again and the means to provide them with water, the right sort of water. All
Right.
of this, we now have the means and the technology, and what we need is the will to do it, and we can.
Absolutely. Well, again, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Emmett, for joining us. I want to remind my audience that epic choices lead to the epic life that we would love to live. I look forward to talking to all of you again soon.
Get your gift copy of the award-winning book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward, at epicbegins.com. That's a wrap on this episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward with your host, Xander Sprague, best-selling author, internationally acclaimed public speaker, and licensed professional clinical counselor. To make your next conference or event epic, send an email to Xander at zander@epicbegins.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, epic choices, epic life.